can refuse it without guilt. Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, most welcome guests. It is my pleasure today to give you a little bit of information on the road to happiness. Now, I started to call this speech, "What goes around comes around," but that seemed a little flippant. And I wanted to give you a couple of important points to take away, so I didn't want to be flippy. I thought I'd do happiness, the road to happiness. Now, when someone says happiness is, what are some of the things people say? Happiness is a smile. What else? Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. A new puppy. Well, thank you, Darren, because tonight, no, I'm not going to do the new puppy. Happiness is not a new puppy and a warm puppy tonight, okay? Happiness is something else. Happiness is the key to success, says this person. And success is really not happiness. It goes the other way around. If you love what you're doing, you will be successful. And if you love and enjoy what you're doing, doesn't it bring you happiness? Sure, of course it does. And so the other thing I think that brings happiness is doing the right thing. So the two things I want you to take away tonight as I go through these little stories are two things that we do in life that bring us happiness and bring others happiness. And they are service to others and doing what we do with kindness and integrity. Okay, ready for those two? All right, doing the right thing. The first little story I want to share with you is from Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller owned his own store. And it was a store that provided wonderful fresh fruits and vegetables and everything to the families that surrounded his area. And he used to have these little boys come by his store. Rather ragged little boys, didn't have any money to spend, but he would spend time with them. One was named Barry, and a little conversation would go like this. "Hi, Barry, how are you today?" "Hello, Mr. Miller. I'm fine, thanks. Just admiring them peas. They sure look good." "They are good, Barry. How's your ma?" "Well, she's fine. She's getting better all the time." "Good. Now, anything I can do to help?" "Nope. Just admiring them peas." "Would you like to take some home?" "No, sir, 'cause I got nothing to pay them with." "Well, what have you got to trade me for these peas?" "Well, I got my prize marble." "Is that right? Well, let me see it." "Here, isn't she a dandy?" I can see that. Only thing is this one's blue and I'm kind of partial to red. Do you have any red ones at home?" "Well, not exactly, but almost." "Well, tell you what, you take this sack of peas home, and the next trip this way, you bring me back that red marble." "Sure will. Thanks, Mr. Miller." Well, Mrs. Miller had been standing beside one of the customers who said to her, "Who's that little person?" And Mrs. Miller said, "You know, there are a couple of other boys just like him in the community. They're all in very poor circumstances. And Jim just loves to bargain with them for peas and apples and tomatoes and whatever else. When they come back with their red marbles, as they always do, he decides he doesn't like red after all, and he sends them home with another bag of produce, and for them to look for maybe an orange marble or a green one." And so the years passed, and Mr. Miller had died, and it was an occasion of his funeral. And this friend that had always bought at the store was standing next to Mrs. Miller. And she said, "Who are those young men in the line waiting to go buy the casket?" And Mrs. Miller looked and she said, "Oh, those," she said, "those are those 3 young boys that I used to tell you about who used to come to our store." When they each went up to the casket, these young men, they put their warm hand over the cold hand of Mr. Miller, one at a time, and they left one at a time, wiping their eye. Those young men, said Mrs. Miller. Oh my, she said, Jim would consider himself the richest man in Idaho because of them. With loving gentleness, she lifted the lifeless fingers of her deceased husband, and resting underneath were 3 red marbles. The moral is we will not be remembered by our words, but by our kind deeds. That was a story that I found in a particularly interesting book online. And I found another book called Happiness Is that had a lot of quotes and little things in it. But one of the biggest things, of course, that we know being entrepreneurs and having our own business is that we are in the service industry. We serve other people by what we do. And I really like this quote by Tolstoy, that the vocation of every man and woman is to serve other people. And so this other story that I want to leave you with, when it comes to helping people, some people just really go out of their way to do that. So here's a little story about a man. His name was Fleming, and he was a poor Scottish farmer. One day, while he was trying to make a living for his family, he heard a cry for help from the bog. There, mired in his waist up to black muck, was a terrified boy screaming and struggling to free himself. Farmer Fleming saved the lad from what could have been a slow and terrifying death, and the next day, a fancy carriage pulled up to the Scotsman's sparse surroundings. An elegantly dressed nobleman stepped out and introduced himself as the father of the boy Fleming had saved. "I want to repay you," said the nobleman. "You saved my son's life." "No, I can't accept payment for what I did," the Scottish farmer replied, waving off the offer. At that moment, the farmer's own son came to the door of the family hovel. "Is that your son?" the nobleman asked. "Yes," the farmer replied proudly. "I'll make you a deal. Let me provide him with the level of education my own son would enjoy. If the lad is anything like his father, he'll no doubt grow to be a man we both be proud of." And he did that. Farmer Fleming's son attended the very best schools, and in time he graduated from St. Mary's Hospital School in London and went on to become known through the world as the noted Sir Alexander Fleming, the discoverer of penicillin. Years afterward, the same nobleman's son who was saved from the bog was stricken with pneumonia. What saved his life? Penicillin. The name of the nobleman? Lord Randolph Churchill. And his son was Sir Winston Churchill. Someone once said, "What goes around comes around." Thank you.